Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leathercraft, and this is the Leather Element. If you've got a good question for us or a good idea for a leather element, drop it in the comment box below. Shop tricks seems to be popular. Well, let's do some more. The big point though here is that if we make things easier on ourselves in our shop, well, first off, the time in our shop, more enjoyable. That's the point. But the side outcome to that, our projects will show that. So let's do this. Let's step over here. This is a common problem with an easy fix. The revolving punch is the center of our leather shop. We can punch just about every hole with this. But here's the problem, and I see this all the time. Happens to me from time to time. If my tube is not sitting flush on my anvil, what's going to happen is I'm not going to get a good punch. In fact, I can even work that around. That's not going to punch through. That's very frustrating. So what we can do, just about every revolving punch out there has this guide arm. So I'm going to loosen this. There we go. Now, the revolving head is free to float. So let's bring that down, center that right on our anvil, push that arm a little bit forward, and now let's tighten that down. Good and tight. So now, I can actually see, no daylight there. That's sitting good and clean on that anvil every time. So we can actually bring a revolving punch back to life if that's the trouble you're having. Now, here's another point. I love the compound. This is great for beginners because, again, compound action. Say we're punching a long line of holes. It's really going to tear up our forearm. This is going to help. The downside here is that these tubes are not replaceable. So what's going to happen is I'm probably going to use 2 or maybe 3 of these tubes, won't use the other ones. So when those tubes wear out, the whole thing is useless. My point here is that as you progress, put a little money into your revolving punch. And here's the reason. With these, we can actually replace our tubes. They unscrew. So therefore, A, I can replace tubes with the most use. B, we load this with the tubes that we commonly use. So therefore, we have a better tool, yet save money in the long run. I love to add beads to my work. In fact, smaller beads, no problem. Lace goes through those easily. But when we start getting to the longer beads, synthetic, not really so much a problem. Our Permalock will run lace right through that. So that's easy enough. But when we jump over to our real bone beads, or the hair pipe beads, again, real bone. The holes in these, not as drilled as I would like for them to be. So with a Permalock, that's not going to fit through. Now, the smallest Permalock, love these, that's going to go through, and that's really not a problem. But now that we're going to jump over to some length, we'll never get that through. So we can take a piece of wax thread, loop it over, let's run that through. Then we can drop our lace in between the loop there and pull it through. Super easy way to go. So we can use our wax thread to pull our lace through a bead. Now, where can we use that? In fact, here's one of my projects, a breastplate. So yeah, that's a lot of hair pipe beads to try to work lace through. And the smaller size, just as difficult. But with a piece of wax thread, makes the whole process quick and easy. I love adding a taper to my belts. To me, that is very professional, very finished looking. But sometimes we have to add a taper. Right here I'm dropping from 2 1/4 down to 1 1/2. So I've got to meet a 1 1/2 inch buckle, or more commonly, standard belt width, 1 1/2 inch. We're going to drop this down to 1 inch, which is a common width for a standard buckle set. Super easy to do. In fact, our tools are going to do all the work for us. Let's start right here as an example. So I've got the tongue in. This is going to be my belt tip. With this, we're going to drop from 1 1/2 down to 1 inch. Now, the math is going to sound complicated. It isn't, because you'll see exactly why we're doing this. So I'm going to drop from 1 1/2 down to 1 inch. The difference there, 1/2 of an inch. Half of that is 1/4 of an inch. So let's subtract that from our actual width. That's going to give us 1 1/4 inch. I know it sounds complicated. It isn't. Here's why. I'm going to set my wooden strap cutter at 1 1/4 of an inch. So therefore, I'm going to come down one side, knock off a quarter, do the same on the other side, knock off a quarter. That's going to give us 1 inch. Okay? So let's cut across. To me, that's much easier than trying to cut a quarter. Now, what we need to do, as I approach this last hole, right here, we need enough room between this last hole and the end of our taper so our buckle will seat. But more than that, we need enough room to to where we can draw that tongue through there and put our buckle bar through that hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come past that hole just to where I can see it. There we go. I can just see that hole. So therefore, that's 5/8 of an inch between the front edge of my knife or my blade and the back edge of my strapper. That's going to give me enough room. Not yet, but we'll get there. So let's flip this over. Let's don't cut this off yet because we're going to use that. That's why we're actually only taking 1/4 of an inch off each side. So let's pull this through. I'm going to come right to that same mark. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So my two pieces parallel. Let's take a 1-inch end punch, English point. Now we can go 3/4, we can go 1 1/4 or 1 1/2. But what I'm going to do is notice I've got two marks drawn in here, roughly 2/3 of the distance from the outside of the tool to the tip, roughly 2/3. Again, you'll see why. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spread that so I know exactly where this point is going to land. I'm going to drop that point right in the top of that. And that mark, let's see if we can swing that around. I'm going to put that mark right on the edge of my leather. In fact, I'm going to swing it back this way just so that I can see it. There we go. Okay, so that was quick and easy. Same thing on the other side. I'm going to drop the tip of the tool right in that corner. I'm going to drop that mark right on that edge. There we go. Look how clean and easy that taper is. But notice too, how symmetrical is that? Very clean, very easy. The obvious progression to that last trick is putting in a belt tip. If you've ever tried to put one of these on, it can be a little bit difficult. Let's see if we can cut through that. So we're going to drop in a 1-inch belt tip on a 1-inch strap. Now, typically, the strap is going to be wider. We'll work with that. But let's start right here. On the back, we've got set screws. Now, this is not a sales pitch, but if you've ever bought a buckle set, I can almost bet that you didn't get one or both screws. Very frustrating. With Weaver, quality speaks for itself. Not only do I have the right amount of screws, but they're already in the tip. So let's do this. With these, this is just a simple little set of what they say is precision screwdrivers. Usually for glasses, for repairing glasses. But they're very inexpensive, and we can find these at most hardware stores. But we always seem to have these small set screws in our shop and need a very small screwdriver. Okay, 2 points here. Let's don't sneeze right now. Those will leave and we will never find them again. But secondly, we're going to get a good laugh when we watch Chuck try to put those back in those holes. All right, so on the end of our strap, let's do this. Let's lay our tip in, about to the end, give or take. And let's take our awl. We're going to mark 2 marks. Let's center that. I'm going to make 2 marks right at the top on either side. Okay? From that mark, let's do this. Let's cut a taper starting at that mark. Now, we could just cut straight out, but what we're going to do is cut that at an angle so we don't have a hard shoulder when this is moving through our belt. We'll see that here in just a second. Let's do the same thing on the other side. Okay? So those 2 cuts are made. Oh, look at that. I'm about to lose those. All right, let's drop this in, right on our lines, and with my awl, I'm going to mark this. Now, this is not an accurate line because it's going to be much smaller. That's the outside of our tip. So let's do this. Let's move these again. Okay. Let's cut about 1/8 of an inch on the inside of that line. And we can make multiple cuts if we need to. This is not going to be seen. So if it's not the cleanest cut you've ever made, we're not going to worry about it. Okay, on our tip, let's round this because usually we have some metal down in the end of this. That's not a perfect cut on the inside. So there we go. Okay, so relatively close. Let's see how our fit is. That's pretty good. In fact, I could shave a little bit more off. I'm not yet up to these 2 shoulders. So let's come in, maybe drop off just a sliver all the way around, and let's maybe shorten that tip a little bit. Okay, let's see how that works for us. just right. Notice my shoulders here. So that's not going to catch on a buckle as it moves through, okay? Now, what I tend to do is I'm going to drop in a little glue on this. Now, I won't do this simply because we're on a test strip here. But I'll drop in a little bit of the white glue. Let's drop this on. That's going to press that glue down into the tip. Let's turn this over. Now, with our awl, because our little screws have a little point on them, let's take our awl, press that in pretty good, and the same right here. Okay? Now the fun part. Let's see if we can get these little screws back down in there. Okay, there's one. I can't believe I did that. All right, and the second one. In fact, these are chrome. That doesn't help the case at all. There we go. Okay, so let's screw those down in there as tight as we can get them. Because typically, this is going to be in there forever. In fact, I don't know if I've ever had to take one out. But let's really screw that down in there. There we go. Okay, those are actually flush. I can feel that one a little bit. With the cheaper sets, it's probably going to have a very long screw. What we can do is take a piece of sandpaper. We can just run over, excuse me, run over the end of those screws, sand those down. Because what will happen is when that goes through our belt and that drags on the belt, it's really going to tear up the belt just past the buckle. But look at that, clean and easy. Not very difficult. Bar stock can be a big help to us in our shop for a bunch of different reasons. First off, bar stock. This is simply pieces of steel from the larger hardware stores. We can buy this in a bunch of different lengths and a lot of different widths. So first off, what I'm going to do is typically buy these in my most common strap sizes. I've got 1 inch, 1 1/4, 1 1/2. So therefore, instead of trying to find my long straight edge, I'm going to try to measure this out. All I have to do is butt that against my edge, cut it, and I've got a 1 1/2 or a 1 1/2 inch strap ready to go. But also, if I'm working from my pattern, say I've got my measurements, my pattern's already drawn in. Again, don't want to try to fight to bring out my big straight edge. I can simply use this to cut the lines on my pattern. Right here, I can drop this in on a good sturdy piece of wood. Now I can clamp, C-clamp, or bolt this onto my table. I can drop a pouch in. I can set a snap, a rivet, or a closure as much as a foot deep in a pouch. Big help to me. But here's one trick. What I want to do is find a little bit thicker steel. I think this is about probably 3/16. The big point there is that when I'm holding this down and I'm cutting, there's very little chance my blade is going to jump the straight edge and end in my finger. In fact, I've got a straight edge around here that's got a long cut that abruptly stops. Guess where it stopped? Yeah, so if we've got a thicker piece, first off, very sturdy. But secondly, very little chance that blade's going to jump that straight edge. So we get a good, clean cut every time. But also, super easy to cut our widths and straps. I love our floral Chicago screws. To me, that's a very professional detail. But at the same time, my favorite hardware finish is antique nickel. That's going to really stand out. So I can take a board, drill some 1/4 inch holes in that, drop my screws down in that. Now let's just hit that little bit of black spray paint. There we go. Let's drop these out and just run a rag across the top of that. Very cool. Subdued that color. But now it's very much an antique nickel look. Now, I can't honestly tell you how long that's going to last, but that paint's sinking down in there. I've had these on a number of projects for years. They still look good. But let's take that a step further. Say we drop in some burgundy or green, blue, yellow. So therefore, we can tie these screws in to maybe a color in our project. That's going to be a nice detail. I hope this is good information for you. Hope there's something here that you can use. Because again, the big point, let's enjoy that time in our shop. And if we do, our project will absolutely show it. Thanks for taking time to watch The Leather Element. Good luck with your projects.